Welcome back to another deep dive crafted just for you.
Yeah.
Today, we're going deep into a case that really gripped England back in 1968. It's the story of Mary Flora Bell, a young girl convicted of manslaughter.
Wow.
So, to navigate this really complex story, we're going to be pulling from a biography,
Okay.
well, some encyclopedia entries, and we're hoping to kind of untangle some questions about, childhood development, accountability.
Yeah.
How does the justice system even begin to approach young offenders? It's a tough one.
It's a tough one. I mean, this case really forces us to look at childhood experiences and how they can impact a person's entire life.
Absolutely.
We tend to associate childhood with innocence.
Yeah.
But Mary Bell's story is, it really challenges that perception.
You're absolutely right. It does. And when you hear about her early life,
Yeah.
the abuse that she suffered at the hands of her own mother,
Right.
it's hard to imagine a childhood further from innocence.
Exactly. The sources detail some horrific instances of Donryu and neglect. Just as an example, one account describes her being dropped from a window
Oh, my God.
as a baby, and then there are reports of her mother, Betty Bell, giving her sleeping pills.
Wow.
And even attempting to sell her to a stranger.
It's hard to even process that. What kind of effect
Yeah.
can that kind of severe sustained trauma have on a developing child?
Well, think about it this way. A child's brain is still developing, right?
Right.
It's learning how to navigate the world.
Yeah.
And when that world is just filled with violence and instability,
Yeah.
it can really distort their understanding of relationships, their sense of safety.
Makes sense.
And you can really see how that early trauma might manifest later in life.
And we see that reflected in Mary's behavior,
Yes.
even before the killings.
Right.
The sources describe her having a history of disturbing behavior.
Yes. Accounts mention bedwetting, fighting, even instances where she tried to choke other children.
It's like those are warning signs.
Right.
But were they missed or like how can we as a society even identify and address these kinds of behaviors in children without prematurely labeling them?
Right.
It's such a complex issue.
It's a delicate balance.
Yeah.
On the one hand, we need to, protect potential victims. We have to think about everyone's safety.
Of course.
But on the other hand, children are still developing. Their behaviors can change. So it's essential to approach these situations with empathy,
Yeah.
Understanding, and really, really a commitment to providing appropriate support.
Yeah. So it's difficult to talk about, but to really get a grip on this case,
Yeah.
we need to address the killings.
Yeah.
Mary was only 10 years old when she strangled a 4-year-old boy, Martin Brown,
Wow.
in an abandoned house.
The details and the sources, they're chilling.
Yeah.
Martin's body was found lying on his back.
Yeah.
And there were no obvious signs of a struggle. So initially, it was really hard to determine the cause of death.
And what's even more unsettling is that Mary and her friend, Norma Bell, who was 13 at the time,
Okay.
were seen near that house shortly after Martin's body was found.
Makes you wonder what was going on.
It does.
Yeah, they were thinking.
And they even, the sources say they even went to Martin's aunt's home
Wow.
and told her about the, quote, accident.
That's hard to fathom.
It is. It's a really perplexing detail.
Yeah.
And tragically, the story doesn't end there. Just a few months later,
Okay.
3-year-old Brian Howe went missing. And his body was found later, hidden among some concrete blocks. And this time the sources describe evidence of strangulation
Okay.
and additional injuries.
So an even more disturbing picture.
Yeah. It's hard to
Yeah.
I mean, when you consider that a child was behind these acts,
Right.
what could possibly lead to this kind of violence?
It's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
The experts, well, they offer a range of perspectives, really.
Okay.
Some propose that these killings may have been a way to get attention, almost a desperate attempt to be seen in a world where she felt completely neglected.
Right.
Others view the acts as expressions of displaced aggression, the culmination of years of just suppressed anger
Yeah.
and trauma.
And we can't forget that Mary was also diagnosed with a psychopathic personality disorder.
Right. Before her trial.
Before the trial.
The psychiatric evaluations are really crucial to understanding this case.
Yeah.
The reports describe Mary as intelligent,
Okay.
but also cunning and prone to mood swings. And there's this recurring theme of lack of empathy, difficulty with impulse control.
Okay.
So it really paints a picture of someone struggling with a distorted sense of reality.
Yeah. So how did the investigation even unfold? Like, what led the police to Mary and Norma?
Well, at first, the police found these notes at a vandalized nursery, and they claimed responsibility for Martin's death.
Oh, wow.
But they dismissed them as pranks.
They did.
They did at first. But then a pivotal moment happened when, during questioning about Brian's murder, Mary mentioned seeing a boy with broken scissors.
Oh.
Now, that was a detail only the police knew at the time.
Oh, so she, revealed something that she shouldn't have known.
It raised some major red flags.
Right.
And immediately shifted their focus onto her.
And that wasn't the only, I guess, incriminating statement, right?
Right. Mary's account of what happened was convoluted.
Okay.
And riddled with inconsistencies.
Oh, wow.
And so under pressure, Norma actually came forward with her own confession.
And what did her confession say?
Well, Norma claimed she witnessed Mary strangling Brian.
Oh, my goodness.
And that Mary even asked her to take over at one point, complaining that her hands were getting tired.
Right.
And this was further supported when Norma actually led the police to a razor blade.
Okay.
That was hidden at the crime scene.
So at this point, they're both with Norma's confession.
Yeah.
And the evidence kind of stacking up against them.
Yeah.
They were officially charged.
With Brian's murder.
With Brian's murder.
Yeah.
How did Mary react to that?
It's interesting. Her response was, quote, "That's all right by me."
Really?
No visible fear, no remorse, just a chilling acceptance.
Wow, that's pretty different than Norma's reaction then.
Oh, yeah.
What was her reaction?
Norma's response was completely different. She reportedly burst into tears, claiming that she was innocent.
Oh, wow.
And that she hadn't, played a part in the killings.
Wow. So you have these two girls.
Two very different personalities. And levels of maybe culpability.
Yeah.
In this tragic situation.
So with both of them facing these very serious charges, I imagine the focus shifted to the trial.
It did.
What were some of the key aspects of that? What made it so captivating to the public?
Well, think about it. This was 1968.
Yeah.
And the idea of children, especially, young girls, committing these kinds of acts was unheard of.
Yeah. I can only imagine it really threw people for a loop.
It became a media sensation.
Yeah.
Capturing the nation's attention.
Because it completely changes how you view childhood innocence.
It does. And the trial proceedings were just as compelling.
Okay.
Both girls testified, but their accounts differed drastically.
Okay.
Norma maintained that she was essentially a bystander.
Okay.
Coerced into participating by Mary's dominant personality.
Mm-hmm. So she's saying that Mary was the one that was influencing her.
She was putting the blame on Mary's influence, claiming that she wasn't really involved.
Okay.
And it's important to note that Norma was assessed as being intellectually delayed.
Okay.
And therefore potentially more susceptible to manipulation.
Oh, I did.
Mary, on the other hand, denied any involvement at all.
Really?
Claiming that Norma was the one that strangled both boys.
Oh, wow.
And that she had actually tried to stop her.
So it's kind of like a he said, she said, but with much higher stakes.
Much higher stakes. How does the jury even begin to navigate those conflicting accounts?
Yeah.
And decide the fates of these two young girls?
There's a lot of pressure on them.
It is. They had to consider the psychological evaluations,
right?
The witness testimonies, all the evidence presented during the trial.
Yeah.
And at the heart of all of that was this question of, their mental capacity.
Yeah.
Their culpability.
And that's where the psyche bowls really come into play.
Absolutely.
Because you get a glimpse into their mental state.
Exactly. And the expert opinions really painted two different portraits. Mary was described as a troubled child with a psychopathic personality disorder.
Right.
Which, in practical terms, means a lack of empathy.
Right.
Remorse. And difficulty understanding the consequences of her actions.
So the prosecution was arguing that she was the mastermind despite her age.
They argued that she was manipulating Norma into participating in the crimes.
But couldn't you also say that minimizes the impact on the victims and their families?
That's the dilemma, isn't it?
Yeah.
The defense, on the other hand, they focused on Mary's horrific upbringing.
Okay.
They painted her as a victim of abuse and neglect
Mm.
and argued that her troubled past, not some inherent, maliciousness,
Right.
led her down this path.
So the jury ultimately had to deal with all of that.
They did.
What was the verdict? How did the court kind of reconcile all these different perspectives?
Yeah. Well, after 9 days of testimony and deliberation, the jury reached a verdict.
Okay.
Mary Bell was found guilty of manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility, which means they believed her mental state at the time prevented her from fully understanding the consequences of her actions.
Right.
Norma, however, was acquitted of all charges.
So they both, I mean, obviously they were both involved.
Right.
But they made a distinction in terms of
culpability.
Culpability, yeah.
Yeah.
Recognizing Mary's
psychological
struggles as a mitigating factor.
And that was reflected in their sentencing too then.
It was. Mary was, she was deemed a potential danger to other children.
Right.
And sentenced to indefinite detention.
Okay.
It was essentially an open-ended sentence, that would be reviewed periodically.
Okay. To determine if and when she might be suitable for release.
Okay.
Norma, having been acquitted, was free to go.
So that sentencing really highlights, just how tricky it is for the justice system to handle these cases, especially when mental health is such a big factor.
Absolutely.
It's
a tough one.
Trying to find that balance between punishment and rehabilitation.
Right.
It's hard. It's a tough one.
It generates a lot of debate. And Mary's case brings up some really important questions, I think. Like, how do you even determine true culpability in a child who's experienced such profound trauma?
Right.
I mean, can you ever really separate...
It's nature versus nurture.
Yeah, I mean, can you separate an individual from their past?
Yeah.
Especially a past that's just filled with horrific abuse.
Yeah. And then, what about the victims' families?
Right,
Their needs.
Where does their justice and closure fit into this?
Yeah, it's a lot to think about.
It's a lot to think about. It's a multifaceted situation. No easy answers.
What about Mary's time in detention? Like, what was that like? Did she get the help and support that she needed?
Well, the sources paint a pretty bleak picture, at least initially.
Okay.
She was moved around quite a bit.
Oh.
First to remand homes and then to a secure unit.
Okay.
Specifically for young offenders.
Okay.
And she was the only female inmate there.
Oh, wow.
Which you can imagine was incredibly isolating and frightening for a young girl.
Yeah. I mean, it makes you think about, even back then, the system, was it really equipped to deal with...
to address the complex needs.
A child like her, yeah.
It's a valid question.
Yeah.
And things actually, according to the sources, got even worse for her.
Oh, no.
Mary later revealed that she had been sexually abused.
Oh, my goodness.
By both staff and other inmates during her time there. It's heartbreaking.
It's awful.
I mean, the system was supposed to help her.
Right.
Instead, she's suffering more.
It highlights the shortcomings of the system, not just then, but, even today.
Right.
Makes you wonder, are we doing enough
to
protect vulnerable young people?
Yeah. Are we giving them the resources, the support that they need to actually, to heal and rehabilitate?
To rehabilitate.
We need to address this.
Absolutely. And it's crucial to remember that Mary's story isn't unique.
Right.
Many young offenders, especially those who've experienced abuse and neglect, face similar challenges.
Right.
We need to make sure their stories are heard.
Yeah.
And that we continue to advocate for change.
So as Mary got older, she was moved to a
women's prison.
A women's prison.
And later an open prison.
Okay.
So over time, as she, matured and demonstrated progress. Right.
She was gradually transitioned to less restrictive environments.
Makes sense.
But her time in custody wasn't without incident.
Uh-oh. What happened?
In 1977, she made headlines again.
Okay.
She escaped.
From the open prison?
From the open prison.
Wow.
With another inmate.
Did they have, a big plan?
Not exactly. They spent a few days with some young men.
Okay.
They met in Blackpool.
Okay.
Went to amusement parks, stayed in hotels, just
So they were just living it up.
Enjoying a little taste of freedom.
Yeah, yeah.
Before they were apprehended.
That's, I mean, typical teenage stuff.
Right.
But under pretty exceptional circumstances. Yeah. So it seems like there's that impulsivity that followed her.
That was noted in the psych evals.
Right.
It seemed to persist.
So after serving nearly 12 years,
right.
Mary was finally released.
In 1980.
In 1980.
Yeah.
What happened? Did she build a new life?
This is where things get a little more ethically debatable.
Okay.
Upon release, she was granted anonymity.
Okay, so she was given a new identity.
New identity. Meant to protect her from public scrutiny.
Yeah.
Harassment. Vigilante justice.
But that's got to be controversial.
It was, and still is.
Yeah.
It raises the question, does everyone, even someone who committed such serious crimes as a child, deserve a new life?
Right.
Free from their past?
I mean, what about the public's right to know?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Where do you draw the line,
yeah.
Between protecting individuals and transparency and accountability?
Yeah. It's a hard one.
It is. There are no easy answers. And Mary's case really brings those questions to the forefront.
It's about individual rights, public safety. It's a whole...
It's a lot.
It's a lot, yeah. And it wasn't just about her, right? This anonymity.
No.
What happened?
This anonymity was extended to her daughter.
Okay.
Who was born a few years after her release.
Wow.
And even further...
To her granddaughter.
To her granddaughter. So... the court recognized a need to protect future generations from the stigma and the potential consequences of her past.
Yeah.
But again, this decision wasn't without its critics.
Right. So even with this new identity,
her
past continued to have an impact, not just on her, but on her family too.
Right.
Did she ever publicly address what happened?
She did, in a way.
Okay.
In 1998, Mary collaborated with an author, Gitta Sereni, on a book called Cries Unheard. In it, she talks about her childhood abuse, her mental state at the time of the killings, and her experiences in prison. So
it was a chance for her to kind of tell her story.
It was. It gave a glimpse into her perspective.
I imagine that brought up the debate again.
It reignited the debate about the case.
Good.
The anonymity, did it provide any closure for the victims' families? Right. Or did it just open old wounds?
Yeah.
I mean, some people saw it as a way for her to profit from her crimes.
Yeah.
Manipulate public opinion.
Right.
Others saw it as a way for her to reclaim her narrative. Shed light on the systemic failures that contributed to her path.
Right. And it also brings up another question, right?
Yeah.
Is it right to give...
I'd give a platform.
A platform.
To someone who's committed such awful acts.
Right. Especially without the families.
Without their consent.
Consent, yeah.
Yeah.
So it sounds like it didn't really provide the answers that people were looking for.
It just added more layers to a really an already intricate and emotionally charged case.
Right. And it's important to remember, right, that there are multiple perspectives here.
Absolutely.
You have Mary's experience and her attempts to kind of deal with what happened.
Grapple with her past.
Yeah. You have the public's fascination with this.
Their desire to understand.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the victims' families.
Right.
Who this has impacted tremendously.
Hugely.
It's really complex. So where is Mary Bell now?
Right.
Has she been able to maintain her anonymity and live a life free of all this?
Yeah. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
But unfortunately, it's a question that we may never know the answer to.
Right.
That court order granting her and her family lifelong anonymity ensures that their current whereabouts, their identities, it's all protected.
So it's a decision that sparks, I mean, there's this ongoing debate.
Whoa, absolutely.
About an individual's right to privacy versus the public's need or want for transparency and accountability.
Exactly.
So we may never know the full story. I mean, some people might say that's a good thing.
Right.
That's how it should be, to protect her and her family.
Right.
But others might say, well, wait a minute. She's kind of evading accountability for what she did.
Yeah. And it's complex, right? There are valid arguments on both sides.
Yeah.
But it does raise the question, can someone who committed such serious crimes as a child, can they ever really escape their past?
Right. Even with a new name,
right,
a new identity, it makes you think, what are the long-term implications?
Yeah, for them and for society, it's a lot.
This has been a really thought-provoking deep dive.
It has.
Mary Bell's story, it forces us to confront, I think, some uncomfortable truths about human nature.
Dark side,
yeah.
The impact of trauma.
The impact of trauma. But it's also a story about resilience.
It is.
The possibility of change.
Right.
And this struggle that we have to find that balance between justice and forgiveness.
It really is. It challenges us, I think, to really look at our assumptions about childhood, culpability, what even is good and evil.
Right.
And it highlights the importance of really understanding childhood trauma.
Yeah.
Not just for the kids, but for all of us.
Yeah, for society at large.
Yeah.
We think of childhood as this time of innocence, right?
Right.
But Mary Bell's story is a reminder that it can also be a time of incredible vulnerability.
Yes.
And the things that they experience, the things that children experience, can shape their whole lives.
Absolutely.
And it really does make you think about these really important questions.
It does.
How do we balance that need for punishment, right, with the possibility that they could change?
Right. Rehabilitation.
Can we truly separate someone from what they've done?
Yeah.
And what does it even mean, to achieve justice for
everyone?
For everyone.
Yeah.
We might not ever have the answers, but it's something that we have to keep in mind.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into a case that continues to make us think.
It does.
About human behavior
and
the justice system and all of its complexities.
It's a story that really stays with you, doesn't it?
It does.
It makes you think.
Yeah, it makes you think, even after we're done talking about it. If you're interested in learning more, there's a lot of books and articles out there, including the biography we mentioned, Cries Unheard.
Yeah.
But we'll leave you with this. Mary Bell's story, it may be chilling, it may be dark,
right,
but it makes us confront our own assumptions about childhood.
Right.
About culpability and the things that people are capable of.
The good and the bad.
The good and the bad, absolutely. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep diving deep.